picture we are seeing, which is a very horrible one. Why is the West resisting, to come to terms with this characterization? And what has been its role in the siege in Tigray, the Western countries, particularly?
Oh boy, I mean, when I look at the West's reaction, I could see, I usually call it a false dilemma, but there is a kind of dilemma that they have. One is how to save Abiy. They have come to a conclusion that Abiy has to be saved by hook or by crook. They have somehow connected Abiy with saving Ethiopia itself. Ethiopia's unity and stability is what they call. If we have Ethiopia's unity, at this point of time, they don't see any alternative to Abiy. Let's put it that way. At this point in time, they might later, but at this point in time, they don't see it. So they don't want to compromise with Abiy's survival as a political leader, at this point in time. In fact, part of the reason why the TDF turned from the gates of Addis Ababa has to do with this fact. The West was determined enough not to let them in, that they gave the green light to United Arab Emirates, Turkey, and all the others to come with fleets of drones and attack the TDF. This is all because of the green light that the West gave to them. So that we know now. But at the same time, they don't want to have a Rwanda in their hand. They don't want to have genocide on their watch. The people like Biden in the White House. They don't want to have that in their history. So, but that turned out to be a minor goal. The main goal, the one that has that they are unwilling to change, is the survival of Abiy. Hence, they are trying to search a compromise in between the two, which is a problem. How do you compromise? How do you make a compromise between a genocider and his victims? It has never been done before. There is no precedence of it. You could separate them, but you couldn't come up with a reconciliation process. So. So in order to save Abiy, in order to create that compromise that they have in mind, remember this interview is regarding to Tigray as a concentration camp. They will never believe that Tigray is being treated as a concentration camp. Why? Because if they do that, they will have to believe that a genocide is taking place inside Tigray. If they do that, they will have to believe that there is a genocider who is doing this, which is the Abiy government. And if they do that, they will have to give up hope on Abiy. And that means there will be no compromise in between Abiy. So they have to humanize Abiy, artificially humanize Abiy, in order to come up with a compromise that they have in mind. We don't know exactly what it is. I don't think it will work, but that's where they are heading. Now, this is what they are doing. The definition of genocide, there is two ends to it. The deed itself has to be seen, as a huge humanitarian crisis. For example, if people die of starvation, let's say if 500,000 people die of starvation, that would count as genocide, but only if there was an intention from the government itself. For example, it could be done through negligence, it could be done through incompetence, it could be done because the country is so poor, it has no means of addressing the problem. So this wouldn't count as genocide if, first of all, the famine has taken place through drought, and it was not man-made. And then second, because the government had no intention to do that. Now, this is what they are doing. So on both ends, they are playing on both ends of the intention end and the deed end. One is to claim that it's not so bad after all. it's not so bad after all. We don't see these figures, dying. So
regardless of the fact that it is dire, very tragic. So it's not even wishing it away. It is a cover up.
It's a cover up. It's literally a cover up. So especially you see that from the UN chief. He couldn't. The UN has yet to call it a famine, let alone a genocide. If it doesn't call it a famine or a genocide, then it's not a famine or a genocide. So you don't even have the deed itself, let alone the intention to attach to the deed. So this is what they have been doing. Another thing that they have been doing is, how about if it really gets bad? If it really gets bad in a way that they cannot avoid, the world cannot avoid it, seeing it, then they have another trick in their hands. It's to say that, well, the Eritreans are doing it, had it not been the Eritreans, had it not been the Amhara Fannos, which have tied up the hands of Abiy, Abiy wouldn't have done that. For example, in the Afar case, we see it now, all that they are saying is, when the Afars blocked, the aid, Abiy could claim, well, I could have done it, it's the Afars that are blocking it. So these multiple agents involved in this genocide makes it creates also a certain ambiguity that the West is exploiting. It could easily shift the intention away from Abiy to other agents in this regard. So that is another one. Let me give you another example. The independent investigation that the United Nations have resolution was passed recently. That was passed recently. Now, look at this. Here is Abiy with clear intentions. He is saying no food, no medicine. He has cut off all services for anyone with the slightest, with a few cells in his brains. He would see that Abiy's intention is the total destruction of Tigray. He's using all these services, the denial of all these services as a weapon to subjugate Tigray. It's as clear as that. So Abiy's strategy has been encircle Tigray, deny it all kinds of services, and destroy it. This has been as clear as anything. Now, for somebody who wants to deny this, he could use even independent investigation. People have taken the independent investigation as a good thing to do. And to some extent it is, taking it away from the joint investigation that Ethiopian and United Nations Human Rights Commission to an independent is a step forward. But still, it presupposes, this independent investigation, it presupposes that there is no genocide in Tigray. It presupposes that Tigray is not being treated as a concentration camp. The very idea of entering into the concentration camp to examine what is going on in there presupposes that there is no concentration camp in the very beginning. Because all the evidence that you need is it could be seen from the outside. Inside, you will only dwell in minor evidences, like, for example, if they get inside, one of the things that the joint commission was blamed was that it's only focused on few villages. Okay, now the independent investigation will go in and it will involve, for example, let's say 100 villages that have been massacred or raped, women or were raped. That is minuscule when compared to looking at Tigray as a concentration camp with the aim of killing hundreds of thousands at minimum and millions at maximum through disease and starvation. Now look at it, Instead, they get into the concentration camp, into the concentration camp to find a few evidences, minor evidences. You have to ignore the bigger evidence in order to focus on the minor evidence. Let me give you an example.
It's like forgetting the forest and looking for the trees.
And focusing for the trees, yeah. For example, in the if you take a prison, for example, we know that in prisons, all the prisoners, they are denied the privileges that they used to have as a free man. You don't need to get inside the prison to find that out. It's legally done. You don't need. If you ever if you have got to inside, it's only to see if they are getting the privileges as prisoners, not as free men. As prisoners. It would be foolish to say, okay, let me go in and see if they have these kinds of rights. Being in prison itself is enough to see that they have been denied, all of that. So I believe, there's a West want to be fooled. It's not lost on it, it just wants to be fooled. And it creates these theatrics, for example, the EU are the ones that came up with this independent investigation. But the EU is the worst, has been the worst in handling this crisis. They haven't done one single thing, to oppose any sanctions or any kind of punishment, against the Ethiopian government. In fact, they are along going. In fact, now, when they saw the retreat of the TDF towards Tigray, they are jumping into the wagon that Abiy has prepared them, the national dialogue, that the farcical national dialogue that is conducting. Every one of them, Germany, France, they are willing to participate into that. So you could see how all of this is going on.
So clearly, this is for a purpose. What do the West has to gain out of this?
Well, I mean, if I am to explain it through, let's say, a handle, if I am to get a handle of this, it would be, I would call it the politics of numbers. I did an interview at one time with EMD called the politics of numbers and does. Now the politics of numbers is, it's 110 million Ethiopians against 6 million Tigrayans. That has been the mantra that the Amhara nationalists have always been saying. Why not eliminate the 6 million in order for Ethiopia to survive? Ethiopian maskattal. So that has been the core. This politics of numbers have been the motor, that drives inside politics and outside politics. And Abiy has cleverly put this into an either or phenomena, not as a compromise that they want, that the West wants, but as an either with us or we are with them. Either you are with the 110 million or you are with 6 million Tigrayans. Choose. That is the way he has put it. And every time he does that, the West, although it's done in a clever way, has chosen the 110 million. Let me give you an example. Why? It's a huge market. Especially after the 27 years of economic development, Ethiopia is taken as a huge potentially as a huge market to deal with. The Chinese are already reaping the benefit, of that development. Now the West knows that it is competing against the Chinese, not only against the Chinese, also against the regional forces around in that area, like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Turkey, Iran, and so forth. So for them, they are, especially Germany and France, what they are doing right now is they are eyeing the huge market in Ethiopia. They don't want to be left out from that. So they want to stay on the right side of Abiy. So whatever they have been doing is with that in mind. Another one is the regional influence. Of course, Ethiopia is a huge country around in that area. Plus, it has that soft power accumulated through years of probably, since Haile Selassie. Yeah? And the Pan-Africanism mantra that you have seen. And the AU is in Addis Ababa. Its office is in Addis Ababa. And the influence that Ethiopia has over the other African countries. They see all of that and they say, okay, if we have to get into that regional, if we have to get that regional influence, we have to stay on the side of the 110 million. Terrorism is another one. Ethiopia was supposed to be not only pacified, not only a peaceful nation, it's a stable and peaceful nation, but also a pacifying force throughout the area from South Sudan to Somalia. Its peacekeeping forces were camped in all these areas. Now, what they are afraid is that with the implosion of Ethiopia, not only will there be resurgence of terrorism such as Al-Shabaab, in that area with Islamic fundamentalism rearing its head everywhere in that area, but also Ethiopia itself might be a breeding ground of terrorism. The other one is migration. That one is probably explains another facet of why the European nations are very keen to keep the Ethiopia's unity and stability in mind. Always when I say unity and stability, you have to take it in quotation marks. It doesn't necessarily mean exactly that. It could be also in some cases it could also mean the opposite of that. But nevertheless, the way they see it, if Ethiopia implodes, there will be millions marching towards Europe the way things happened when Syria imploded, but in a much more, in greater numbers. But they are comparing with this. Okay, how about if Tigray implodes? Well, it's a small territory inside Ethiopia, so it's not good for if these people make it to Sudan. Still, there will be a headache to Europe. Tens of thousands of make to Europe, but it's a much less. It's a minor problem as compared with the implosion of Ethiopia. What the implosion of Ethiopia would bring? That's another one, and that's where it gets macabre, where it gets almost evil, is that the European nations know, so far as Tigray is encircled, so far as Tigray is a concentration camp, they are safe on the migration problem, even from Tigray. Part of the reason why the Amhara force drove the more than 1 million Tigrayans into Tigray was not only that the thing that I told you before, but also because they were telling in an unspoken, but they were sending a message to Europe: we are also taking care of your problem. No Tigrayans will come out of Tigray to Sudan, causing a headache. So just pretend that they are not seeing what's happening inside Tigray. Literally, what they are telling them is the ones that were supposed to make to Europe will die in Tigray. That's why I believe that the Europeans have never been as vocal as the US, for example, when it comes to Western Tigray, with that in mind. So you have all of this, arrayed, against Tigray. Tigray being 5 million, it doesn't have a seacoast like Eritrea to attract, regional forces and stuff like that. Now, Tigray is being sacrificed as a result of that, and they are doing it coated with humanitarian concern, the concern that they always talk about, gravely concerned, hugely concerned, or deeply concerned. We hear all those words, but in reality, this is exactly what's happening.
And now let's bring Eritrea into the picture. It's no doubt that Eritrea has contributed a lot in turning Tigray into this huge concentration camp. And this diabolic task is still going on. Why? What is Eritrea trying to achieve?
Probably, I believe that when it comes to the case of Eritrea, many of us have been misunderstanding what's going on the side of Eritrea. We keep underestimating what has been the program or the aim or the goal of Isaias throughout all of this. Let me put it this way. For example, most of us assume that the moment the EPRDF era came to an end with Abiy ascending the throne, Isaias was probably overjoyed. I don't think so. I think it's just the opposite that happened. He was not overjoyed. Isaias was not overjoyed. If you look at it that way, we probably would come as to why Eritrea is doing what it's doing right now. Think about this. Sorry. The end of EPRDF for Isaias, with the end of EPRDF, he saw three assurances that he had coming to an end. Three big assurances that he had coming to an end. One is, in the 27 years of EPRDF rule, Eritrea's sovereignty has never been threatened. The Eritrean independence and the Eritrean sovereignty has been, I could say that it has been guaranteed by the EPRDF. He knew that. Even, throughout the animosity in between the two EPLF and TPLF, he knew that the TPLF would never try to reverse Eritrean independence. They would never try to violate Eritrean sovereignty. He knew that. So the 27 years of reign of EPRDF assured him that this will never happen. That assurance was coming to an end with the end of EPRDF rule, with the coming of Abiy. Number one. Number two is regime change. He was also assured again, by the EPRDF that they will never aim to change his government. Their primary policy throughout the 27 years has been containment. How do you contain Eritrea as it is? It's like holding, a mad person, putting a straitjacket around him, So all that they have to do is surround Eritrea, so that it couldn't do anything foolish inside Ethiopia, and kill it economically, even demographically, since people were leaving the nation. All that they have to do is that, and Ethiopia is safe. And it worked. It killed Eritrea, but they never aimed for a regime change. So he was sure that Sha'biya was safe so far as EPRDF was in power. The third thing was Eritrea, being a totalitarian nation, if it's going to survive it, it has to be sealed off from the rest of the world, especially sealed off from the neighboring countries. That means Ethiopia and Tigray in particular. Now, again, unknowingly, we could call it, or knowingly, the EPRDF helped Isaias in this process. How? Their containment process, and their unwillingness to resolve the border issue, that demarcation, and the containment process was sealing of Eritrea from the outside. They were sealing off Eritrea from the outside, as he was sealing of Eritrea from the inside through various means, through Sawa and the National Service and all the things that he used to do inside Eritrea. He was sealing off Eritrea. So they helped him, and no, of course not knowingly, but they helped him also in the sealing of process of Eritrea. Eritrea cannot survive in an open world. We have seen that, for example, in that brief moment when it was opened, in 2018, when the border between Eritrea and Ethiopia was open, and many people left to Tigray. Tens of thousands of people flowed in Tigray. Most of them didn't come back, and its economy was almost on the verge of collapse because of what was happening, of the trade that was happening in between. So he quickly responded by closing the border again. But it shows you that an open Eritrea cannot survive. It's the nature of totalitarian nations. For example, if you take Korea, North Korea, North Korea would never survive if it opens itself to, let's say, trade and visitation with South Korea. People would see immediately what's the difference. And so in Tigray also they saw the same, they saw the peace in Tigray, they saw the prosperity in Tigray, the development in Tigray, they saw the relative democracy in Tigray. So that would mean that eventually the Eritrean government would collapse. So these three assurances came to an end when Abiy came. Isaias knew that anyone who would come at the top of the Ethiopian leadership, be it Amhara or Oromo, would eventually, sooner or later, they would eventually work against Eritrea. They would probably head towards Asab. That is the first thing they would do. The Amhara elite have been crying, Yebahar Barachin, our gate to the sea is Asab. They have all that they have been doing was crying for years about that. Now, think about this. The most vulnerable part of Eritrea is the Danakil area. You could see it geographically. It's a barren desert of a strip of land, elongated strip of land, all bordering the greater Afar on the side of Ethiopia. Now, if you could cut off that, and then in addition to that, the Danakil of the Afar Danakil in Dankalia in Eritrea, they have never bought the idea of Eritrean independence. They felt more allied with their Afar kins on the side of Ethiopia than with the Eritreans. So, if Ethiopia captures that strip of land, that's it. All that it would do is to destroy the rest of Eritrea. So Isaias knew this. Isaias knew this, that anyone that comes after EPRDF will not be nice to him as EPRDF has been. So he took a preemptive action. All that he has done is take a preemptive action. He knew that if there is war coming from Ethiopia, it will be a disaster for him. If there is peace from Ethiopia, if through some miracle also, a benevolent Ethiopian leader would say, okay, we will never violate the Eritrean sovereignty. All that we need is access to Asab, to Masawa. It means he is asking for an open Eritrea. And that will also be a disaster, as we have seen before. So both roads, the road to the war or the road to peace that leads to peace, with an Ethiopia that's ruled by either an Amhara or an Oromo, would end up in disaster, because the seal of Eritrea will be no longer available. So both of them will end up in disaster for Eritrea, especially for Shabia. So he knew that. What he did is he took a preemptive action to disrupt that. His aim is a perpetual destabilization of Ethiopia, at minimum, is the end goal. The end goal is a perpetual destabilization of Ethiopia at minimum, and at maximum, the fragmentation of Ethiopia itself. If you could achieve that, then you would assure, to have Sha'biya Eritrea as a totalitarian state, for at least until he's there, So that's exactly what he was aiming at. What did he do? He knew exactly the trigger points, exactly. He wanted, to direct the hate that the Ethiopians have towards, or the goal and the aim that they have towards Eritrea, to change it towards one another. The animosity has to be changed towards one another. So he came with this perfect crime. The perfect crime is to kill the very person that was helping him, the very entity that has been helping him, which is Tigray. Tigray has been a buffer zone that kept Eritrea alive while it was in power. Now it's no more a buffer zone. And what he is proposing to the Amharas and the Abiy is, let's kill together Tigray. If he does that, he hides all his intentions, all the intentions that he have for Ethiopia, because they hate Tigray at the same time, and they have other goals. For example, to the Amharas, he knew the triggering point would be Western Tigray. He kept saying again and again that the Amharas we used to border with the Amharas, which means Western Tigray. Western Tigray became the rope around which Isaias hung the Amharas. They jumped into it without having any clue where he is taking them. So that was one. The other one is, of course, the anti-federalism, that exists in every Amhara elite. He also knew that. That's why he's vocal about that all the time. He talks about Ethiopia. And then you have also this vague promise, because he knew that they are concerned about Asab, about the gate to the sea. And he always came up with this vague promise of Asab, being used by Ethiopians. He even said that there might be a union with Ethiopia, in a very vaguely articulated terms, that a confederation comes up, one of them, And so he knew exactly which trigger points he has to push when it comes to the Amharas. The same thing happened on the side of Abiy. He knew exactly the time he saw him, he knew he didn't make the mistake that many other people made a mistake. He saw a dictator in the making. He saw the delusional grandeur that he had. Abiy had, the seventh king type of delusion, He promised him the entire Horn of Africa, that he could be the leader, I am giving him the key. Remember that word, mafteh? To rule all over that area, not only Eritrea, but also the Somali areas also. So he came up with this vaguely articulated union in that area, precisely because Abiy is gonna fall into that. Of course, in addition to that, he also tried to give them very tangible reasons to believe him. He offered Assad for a naval base, which would be a disaster if you look at it from the Eritrean nationalism kind. But he knew exactly what he was doing. That also gave the Amhara elite and Abiy, the full assurance that Isaias is with them. That somehow this guy he wishes good for Ethiopia. So you have also that. So that perfect crime that he created was what we are looking at now. Now, has he met his 3 goals so far? Yes, he has met his 3 goals. First of all, he has assured, at least for now, he assured the sovereignty of Eritrea, because their primary enemy is Tigray and not Eritrea. So he has shifted the attention towards Tigray. The other one is he has also assured the survival of his regime, the Tigray regime, so far as they are at each other's throat, they have no time to, in fact, they are dependent on him right now, are dependent on him. That's exactly how he wanted it to be. And the last one is Eritrea has remained sealed off as a nation. Imagine that. Think about 3 years have passed. If they had the slightest bit of, thinking left in their mind, the slightest bit of understanding all this problem, in their heads, they would have asked this question. In these 3 years, why is it Ethiopia is not using Aseb as a trading post, as a port, as a port? So it's having a problem with Djibouti. So it's aiming towards Barbara, and remember the Somaliland case that has been on the news these recent days. UAE is trying to open the port of Barbara for Ethiopia. Asab is there. Why is it Asab has not been opened up to now? This is the question that they should have asked. Why is it he's promising them, a naval base in Asab, but yet he has prevented them from using the Asab port up to now. Not a single truck of goods makes it from Asab to Ethiopia up to this day. So you can understand, how he is playing them. So far it means that he has prevented that one, and then of course he has also prevented the attraction that is Ethiopia used to be for Eritreans. For example, Tigray has been the main attraction for Eritreans because of its peace, prosperity, and all of that. When he entered Tigray, he was destroying the entire Tigray. Part of that, the reason was never to make it an attraction for Eritreans. By doing that, what he's doing is he is sealing again. He is aiming at sealing of Eritrea. You could see that he's partly succeeded on that because the tens of thousands of refugees that they used to flow from Eritrea every year have stopped. And so by creating a dystopian world inside Ethiopia, by creating anarchy in Ethiopia, he has made it unappealing to Eritreans. And therefore, he has created a shield of Eritrea. So he has succeeded. Is he going to succeed eventually? I doubt it. These things will backfire one day. I doubt it. But so far, he has succeeded in doing what he has done.
And thank you, Yosief, for all this very, incisive analysis and, elaborate explanations. Thank you, as usual, for your contribution.
Thank you a lot, and thanks also for our listeners. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, dear viewers, for the time we had. I hope you enjoyed the discussion, and till we come up with another